It's Natasha and Co. 18th of July, 22:15 p.m. Back to M. Scott Peck, People of the Lie, starting chapter 4, page 170. Chapter 4 has a number of subsections. They are in the beginning, confusion, then one way or the other, infant or adult, then a law unto herself, then the dream of the marvellous machine, then no win, then evil and power, and then if I had to do it over again. So it goes. I have noted how difficult it is to examine evil people in depth because it is their nature to avoid the light. Denying their imperfection, the evil flee both self-examination and any situation in which they might be closely examined by others. Yet in this chapter, a woman will be described who, seemingly evil to some degree, nonetheless submitted herself to extensive psychoanalytic psychotherapy. Although rare, this case is not one of a kind. I myself attempted to treat one other such patient and have supervised therapists working with several remarkably similar cases. In every instance, although lengthy, the treatment was a failure. It is not fun to fail, but it can be highly educational. In the psychotherapy business as well as in the rest of life. We probably have even more to learn from our failures than from our successes. Certainly no patient ever taught me more than the one to be described. It is my hope that she will also serve others. Examining such questions as why she entered treatment in the first place, why she persisted in it for some 400 sessions, and why she totally failed to be affected by it, perhaps we can ultimately arrive at a depth of understanding out of which we will be able to help and heal the Charlenes of this world. Right, first subsection is called In the Beginning, Confusion. In the beginning, there was nothing to mark Charlene as particularly unusual. She came to me at age 35 with a complaint of depression following a breakup with her boyfriend. Her depression did not seem severe. She was petite and rather attractive, but not a remarkable beauty. She had a capacity for humour and obvious high intelligence. Clearly, however, she was an underachiever in the game of life. For reasons that were initially vague, she had repeatedly failed in an undemanding college. Nonetheless, after a year of proving her worth as a volunteer, she was hired by her Episcopal Church as its director of religious education. 6 months later, she was fired by the rector. She attributed this to his capriciousness, but the pattern continued. Capricious. Yeah, capriciousness is impulsive or unpredictable. So she attributed this to his capriciousness. But the pattern continued. She lost 7 more jobs before obtaining the one as a telephone operator that she held when she came to see me. Similarly, her recent breakup with her boyfriend was only the last in a long, unbroken string of failed romantic relationships. In fact, Charlene had no real friends at all. Still, people usually enter therapy for one kind of underachievement or another, and although marked, Charlene's lack of success was hardly unique. Little did I know she would turn out to be the damnedest patient with whom I had ever worked. Exploring her background, I found that Charlene seemed to have few illusions about her parents. Except for considerable money, there was apparently little they had given her. Preoccupied with his inherited wealth, her father had been utterly uninvolved with the care of her or her younger sister Edith. Their mother, a fanatic Episcopalian who mouthed the words of Jesus continually, was unabashed in her hatred of her husband. "If it weren't for you girls, I would have left him long ago," she told them at least once a week. Of course, Charlene noted wryly, even though Edie and I have been out of the house for over a decade, she still hasn't left. Edie had become a lesbian. Charlene considered herself bisexual. Edie was doing well in the banking business, but was not happy. Whenever she considered herself to have a problem, Charlene had no compunction about blaming her parents. "They really fucked us up. My father in love only with his stocks and bonds, and my mother with her gas bubbles and her prayer book. Certainly her parents did sound uncaring, even nasty and wicked. But lots of patients have wicked parents. Even Charlene's unusual religious faith did not distinguish her. After being fired from her job at the church, Charlene had gradually drifted into a cult of sorts that proclaimed a hodgepodge of Hindu, Buddhist, Christian, and esoteric theology, along with a belief in the love vibrations of meditation. But such cults are a dime a dozen, and this one seemed to encourage neither fanaticism nor dependency. Her membership in it seemed natural enough in view of her mother's misuse of Christianity and her own fury at the rector who had fired her. What did distinguish Charlene, however, was my confusion in relation to her. Generally, by the time they spent 5 or 6 hours in therapy with a patient, psychiatrists will have at least a superficial understanding of the patient's problem. There will be at least a tentative diagnosis. After 4 dozen sessions with Charlene, I still did not have the foggiest idea of what was wrong with her. Underachievement, yes, but why? No. Frustrated, I went through a checklist of diagnostic categories in my mind, asking her very specific questions. I wondered, for instance, whether she might have an obsessive-compulsive neurosis, and I questioned her about all the possible symptoms of this neurosis, such as ritualistic behaviour. Charlene understood perfectly. With considerable enthusiasm, she described several minor rituals she had performed during her early adolescence, a common, almost normal time for such behaviour. She would arrange the objects in her room in a certain way and in certain sequences before she felt comfortable going to sleep at night. As a child, she had been told that in the army, soldiers were required to make their beds so tightly that the drill sergeant could bounce a quarter off them. So, each morning when she was 13 and 14, Charlene would bounce a quarter off her bed, always before she brushed her teeth. But by the time I was 15, she said, I realised these things were a silly waste of time, and I just stopped doing them. I haven't had any rituals since. So I was stumped once again, and I remained stumped. Another 3 dozen sessions were to go by before I got the first inkling of Charlene's character. One day, after 9 months of therapy, when she handed me a cheque for the preceding month, I noticed that it was issued from a different bank. You've changed banks? I questioned casually. Charlene nodded. Yes, I had to. You had to? I picked up my ears. Yes, I ran out of cheques. You ran out of cheques? I repeated dumbly. Yes, haven't you noticed? Charlene sounded a bit piqued. Each cheque I've given you has had a different design on it. No, I haven't noticed, I acknowledged. But what has that got to do with changing banks? You're not very swift, are you? Charlene countered. I ran out of new designs at my old bank, so I had to get a new checking account in order to have new designs. More confused than ever, I asked, Why do you have to use a different design each time? Because it's a love offering. A love offering? I repeated once again, bewildered. Yes, whenever I write a cheque to anyone, I ask myself what his or her particular design is at that point in time. It's a matter of vibrations, you see. Through love, I tune in on their vibrations and then I make the selection. But I never like to give a person the same design more than once, and my old bank only had 8 different designs. Actually, it's because of you I had to change banks, since this is the 9th cheque I've given you. Still, I had to change because of the electric company anyway, but they're more impersonal. It's hard to get vibrations off of them. I was dumbfounded. Perhaps I should have picked up on the issue of love right there and then, but I was overwhelmed by the bizarreness of this minor but repetitive interaction. It sounds like a bit of a ritual, was the best comment I could make. Yes, I suppose you could call it a ritual. But I thought you didn't have any rituals. Oh, I've got lots of rituals, Charlene answered gaily. And she did. Over the next few sessions, she told me of dozens of rituals. Almost every single thing she did was connected, one way or another, with a ritual. It became abundantly clear that Charlene did indeed have a form of an obsessive-compulsive disorder. Since you've got dozens of rituals, I queried, how come when I asked you about rituals 4 months ago, you told me you didn't have any? I just didn't feel like telling you. Maybe I didn't trust you enough. But you were lying. Of course. Why should you pay me $50 an hour to help you and then lie to me so I didn't know how to help? I asked. Charlene looked at me archly. I'm certainly not going to tell you anything until I think you're ready to know it, she replied. Now that she had confessed her rituals, it was my hope that Charlene would become increasingly open in our work together and I, consequently, less confused. It was not to be, however. Only gradually did it begin to dawn on me that she was a person of the lie. Although during the months and years ahead she would, willy-nilly, reveal one aspect or another of herself, Charlene remained largely enigmatic and I remained confused, which was the way she wanted it. She continued until the end to withhold information from me, if for no other reason than to keep control of the show. And while my understanding of her was to deepen, so was my awe of her basic incomprehensibility. The next subsection, page 175, is called One Way or the Other, Infant or Adult. Shortly after revealing her rituals, Charlene began revealing something else, her intense desire for me. This was not surprising at first. I cared for Charlene. She kept her appointments and paid for them faithfully, presumably from an earnest desire for growth. I was eager to meet her efforts with dedication of my own. Anything she said, everything that happened to her was of deep interest and import to me. It is natural for a patient, in response to consistent attentiveness, to romantically desire the therapist when he or she is of the opposite sex. This is especially the case when the patient never succeeded during childhood in overcoming the Oedipal dilemma. All healthy children experience sexual desire for the parent of the opposite sex. This desire usually reaches its peak around the age of 4 or 5 and is referred to as the Oedipal dilemma. It places the child in a dreadful predicament. The romantic love of the child for the parent is a hopeless love. The child will say to its parent, I know you tell me that I can't have sex with you because I'm a child, but just look at how grown up I am acting and you will change your mind. This grown-up act requires enormous energy, however, and ultimately cannot be sustained by the child. It becomes exhausted. Resolution of the dilemma finally occurs when the exhausted child accepts the reality that it is a child and cannot, and no longer desires, to pull off the appearance of adulthood. In so doing, the child also realizes it cannot have its cake and eat it too. It cannot both sexually possess its parent and at the same time be a child. It therefore opts for the advantages of being a child and renounces its premature sexuality. There's a note here that reads, among the reasons that the Oedipus complex is so important in psychiatry is that adults who have failed to resolve it usually have great difficulty in accomplishing many of the renunciations required for successful adult adjustments. They still have not learned that they cannot have their cake and eat it too. The Oedipal dilemma has been resolved. Everyone breathes a sigh of relief, particularly the child, who becomes visibly happier and more relaxed. In psychotherapy, the patient who failed to resolve the Oedipal dilemma during childhood must essentially undergo the same process in relation to the therapist during adulthood. He or she must learn to give up the therapist as a romantic sexual love object and settle for being the therapist's child on a symbolic level. Once this occurs, things go very smoothly. The patient can relax and enjoy the therapist's parental ministrations. Unimpeded, he or she will then absorb the therapist's wisdom and love. Only it did not go that way between Charlene and me. The first inkling I had that this stage of her treatment was not progressing well was a growing sense of revulsion I began to experience toward her. This was highly unusual in my experience. When an attractive woman patient desires me, my usual problem is how not to respond in kind. I will have my own sexual feelings and fantasies for her and must make sure these in no way interfere with my judgment and my commitment to the therapeutic role. Certainly, I usually have no difficulty feeling warmly toward patients who entrust their love to me. Yet with Charlene, it was another matter. I had no positive sexual fantasies about her. To the contrary, the thought of a sexual relationship with her made me actually nauseated. Even the notion of non-sexually just touching her gave me a faintly queasy feeling, and it didn't get better. The more time passed, the more my gut desire was to keep a distance from her. Possibly my growing sense of revulsion was not primarily a sexual response. It was also not unique to me. Another patient, a quiet, perceptive and intelligent woman, began one session by asking, "You know that lady who always comes to see you before me?" I nodded. She was referring to Charlene. "Well, she gives me the willies. I don't know why. I've never even talked to her. She just comes into the waiting room, gets her coat and leaves. She's never said a word to me, but she gives me the willies." "Maybe it's because she isn't friendly," I suggested. "No, I'd just as soon not talk to your other patients. It's something else. It's like, well, I don't know how to put it. It's like there's something evil in her." "She doesn't look strange, does she?" I asked, fascinated. No, she looks just like an ordinary person. She dresses well. She might even be a professional woman, but something about her gives me the creeps. I can't put my finger on it, but if I've ever seen someone who's evil, she's the one." Whether or not my sense of revulsion was primarily sexual, Charlene's sexual behaviour during our sessions was quite extraordinary. Ordinarily, when a woman patient experiences affection for me, she is shy, even secretive about it at first. Not so Charlene. She, who routinely withheld information from me, was blatant about her seductive intent. "You're cold," she said accusingly. "I don't see why you won't hold me." "Perhaps I could hold you if you needed comforting," I replied, "but your desire to be held feels sexual to me." "You and your nitpicking distinctions," Charlene exclaimed. "What difference does it make whether I want to be comforted sexually or in some other way? Either way, I need comforting." "You do not need a sexual relationship with me," I tried to explain again and again. "You can have that with anyone. What you are paying me for is a more special kind of care." "Well, I don't think you care for me at all. You're stiff and distant. You're not warm. I don't see how you're going to be able to help me when you don't even feel warm toward me." I was beginning to wonder about this myself. Always Charlene caused me to wonder if I was the right therapist for her. There was also an illicit, sneaky, invasive quality to Charlene's desire for me. In the summer, she used to come early to our sessions and would sit in our garden. Had she asked my permission to do this, I do not think I would have begrudged it. I like people to enjoy the flowers that are my wife's and my hobby. But she never asked. Several nights when we did not have appointments, I looked outside to see Charlene parked in front of our house, just sitting in her car listening to the radio playing softly in the darkness. It was eerie. When I asked her about it, she simply said, "You know you're the man I love. It's natural to want to be near someone you love." One day, when we did not have an appointment, I came into our library to find Charlene sitting reading one of my books. I asked her what she was doing there. "It's a waiting room, isn't it?" she replied. "It's a waiting room when you have an appointment," I responded. "When I'm not seeing patients, it's a private room in my house." "Well, for me, it's a waiting room," Charlene said with utter comfort. "When you have your office in your home, you have to expect to lose some of your privacy." After ascertaining that she had no valid reason for seeing me, I practically had to order her out. More than any other time in my life, I personally felt something of what it must be like for a woman to receive unsolicited advances and even to be in fear of rape. Indeed, twice at the end of a session, Charlene actually grabbed me and attempted to embrace me before I pushed her away. A major reason children often fail to resolve the Oedipus complex is that they have failed to receive adequate parental love and attention in the years before the age of 4, the so-called pre-Oedipal years. Solving the Oedipal dilemma is like building the first story of a house. It simply cannot be done unless there is a foundation to build upon. Many signs pointed to the probability that Charlene had been emotionally deprived from the beginning. Her mother was clearly an ungiving woman. Charlene had no memory whatsoever of either parent ever holding her. She dreamed frequently of breasts. She ritualistically followed the strange dietary laws of her cult, with the result that she was always searching for odd organic foods and, when dining with others, always eating something different from them, something special. In psychoanalytic terms, Charlene's most basic problem was not an unresolved Oedipus complex, but a condition of pre-Oedipal oral fixation. Charlene's yearning to touch and be touched by me was in fact a yearning for mothering, the warm, no-strings-attached cuddling of which she had been deprived. I experienced her desire for touching as repulsive and threatening, yet was not touching exactly what she desperately needed. In order to heal her, should I not have done the very thing I found so distasteful? Should I not have taken Charlene on my lap, held her and fondled her and kissed her and caressed her until she was finally at peace? Perhaps so, perhaps not. I seriously considered it, but in so doing I realised something. I realised that although I was willing to nurture Charlene as a sick and hungry infant, she was unwilling to receive that kind of attention. She was unwilling to assume the role of child, much less infant, in relation to me. The essence of my distaste for touching her lay in her insistence that the touching be sexual. She saw herself not as a hungry child, but an adult on the make. I repeatedly attempted, through a variety of means, including the use of the couch, to help her take a more passive, trusting, childlike posture with me. All my attempts failed. Throughout all the 4 years she worked with me, Charlene insisted on controlling the show. To have been like a young child, she would have had to give me the reins, to have let me care for her parentally instead of demanding that I care for her sexually. But this she would not do. She wanted the reins in her hands every moment. The process of deep healing, at least within the psychoanalytic framework, requires the patient to regress on some level to some degree. It is a difficult and frightening requirement. It is no easy thing for adults accustomed to independence and the psychologic trappings of maturity to allow themselves to become like young children again, dependent and so very vulnerable. And the deeper the disturbance, the more hungry and painful and wounding the patient's childhood, the more difficult it is to return to the childhood condition within the therapeutic relationship. It is like a death. Yet it can be accomplished. When it is, healing will result. When it does not, the foundation cannot be reconstructed. No regression, no healing. It is as simple as that. If I had to put my finger on a single cause for Charlene's failure to be healed in the long years she spent with me, it would be her failure to regress. When patients succeed in regressing, there is an entirely different quality to their demeanour in therapy. They develop a peacefulness they did not have before. They have a kind of trusting innocence which can be suspended at any moment, given the need, but which can also be easily recaptured. The interaction between patient and therapist becomes not only smooth, but even playful and joyful. It is an ideal partnership of loving mother and child. Had this state of affairs been achieved with Charlene, and had it seemed necessary to do so, I have no doubt that I could and would have taken her on my lap and given her all she needed. But this state of affairs did not come to pass. Although in her core she was obviously an infant, there was never anything innocent or truly trusting about her. She continued until the end to act the adult on the make. I still don't see why, Charlene said 3 years into therapy. Still don't see what, I asked. I don't see why a child shouldn't have sex with its parents. I patiently explained once again that it is the parent's job to assist their child toward independence, and independence from one's parents is always retarded by incestuous ties. But this wouldn't be incest, Charlene said. You're not my father. I may not be your actual father, I responded, but my role as your therapist is a parental one. My job is to help you grow, not to sexually satisfy you. You can get sex elsewhere with your peers. But I am your peer, she explained. Charlene, you're my patient. You've got all kinds of big problems you need help with. I want to help you with those problems. I do not want to sleep with you. But even though I'm your patient, I can still be your peer. Charlene, the plain fact of the matter is that you are not my peer. You can't even hold a menial job for more than a few months. You haven't even learned to find your way around in broad daylight. Psychologically, you're practically an infant. And that's okay. You had lousy parents and you've got all kinds of reasons to still be an infant. But stop trying to pretend you're my peer. Why don't you just relax and enjoy my attention as a parent? I really want to love you that way, but please stop trying to possess me sexually. Give it up, Charlene. I won't give it up. I want you and I intend to have you. Although she could not have been more blatant about what she wanted from me, I still sensed Charlene's advances as inherently dishonest. She was trying to obtain breastfeeding under the guise of sex. She sought infantile nurturance in the disguise of adult sexuality, which is not in itself such an uncommon phenomenon, except that Charlene steadfastly refused to let the disguise be penetrated. Time and time again I said to her, one way or another, you really want me to mother you. That's okay. That's nice. I'd like to do that. It's something you need. In fact, you deserve it. You were cheated of it in the past, and you deserve to have it made up to you. Forget about this sex stuff. You're not ready for it. You're too young. Relax. Lie back and enjoy the warmth I can give you. Let me nurture you. But she did not. To a certain extent, this was because she regarded my offer as a trap, as well she might, since the kind of mothering she had received as a young child had been a trap. Had this fear alone been the source of her resistance, however, it could probably have been worked through and overcome. But the issue of pure power was more important. It was not simply that she was afraid to give me a maternal power over her, rather it was that she did not want to relinquish any power for any reason. She wanted healing, but she was not willing to lose anything, give up anything in the process. It was as if she demanded of me, heal me, but don't change me. She wanted not only to be nurtured, but to be the boss of the nurturer. And there's a note there. The note reads, the desire for regression to a state of union with the mother was one of the three characteristics Erich Fromm found in his analysis of the evil personality or syndrome of decay in The Heart of Man, Its Genius for Good and Evil, 1964. He labelled this desire incestuous symbiosis. Certainly, I found this desire in Charlene, but I have also found it in many others. A crucial factor in evil, I suspect, is not simply a regressive yearning for mother, which can be used for healing, but rather the attempt to obtain mother without regression, and an insistence on receiving mothering without relinquishing either the adult role or any of the power associated with it. When Charlene berated me for my lack of warmth and desire to hug her, she kept saying, I just want you to affirm me. How can I be cured by a therapist who won't even affirm me? This was an important word. The essence of maternal love for the infant is affirmation. The ordinary healthy mother loves her infant for no reason other than simply the fact that it is here. The infant does not have to do anything to earn her love. There are no strings attached to it. The love is unconditional. She loves the infant for itself, as it is. This love is a statement of affirmation. It says you are of great value simply because you exist. During the second and third year of its life, the mother begins to increasingly expect certain things, such as toilet training from her child. And when this happens, her love inevitably becomes, to at least some degree, conditional. She now says, I love you, but I wish you would stop tearing up the books. But I wish you would stop pulling the lamp off the table. But I wish you would help me by going to the potty so I don't have to wash these diapers anymore. The child learns the words good and bad, and it learns it can continue to be fully affirmed only by being a good child. Now it has to earn its affirmation, and so it is forever after. The period of unconditional affirmation lasts only as long as infancy. As psychological adults, we have all learned, to a greater or lesser degree, that in order to be loved, it is our responsibility to make ourselves lovable. A key element in Charlene's behaviour was her request, no, her demand, that I love her regardless of how she behaved, that I affirm her not just for who she might become, but for who she was, sickness and all. In so doing, I would give her what she desired from me, the love of a mother for her infant, the consistently unconditional love that can be experienced only in infancy. It is no wonder that this was so, because we had evidence that she had failed to receive from her mother the unconditionally affirming love during her infancy, which ought to be the heritage of every child. Of this heritage she had been cheated, but it was impossible for me to make it up to her. For she demanded that I love her unconditionally as a sick adult. She insisted that I love her as a mother would an infant, but she insisted also that I treat her as an adult peer. If for no other reason, her demand was impossible to fulfill, because it was a demand to affirm her sickness. There's a note. In Martin Buber's words, the evil insists upon affirmation independent of all findings. Good and Evil, Charles Schreiber's Sons, 1953. Yes, the evil insists upon affirmation independent of all findings. Charlene did not want to be healed. She wanted to be loved, not changed. She wanted to be loved for herself, neurosis and all, although she would never say so. It gradually became clear that Charlene remained in therapy with the intent to obtain my love without therapy. That is, to have both my love and her neurosis, to have her cake and eat it too. I will pause there before the next subsection. Thanks for listening.